Thank you again for joining us for this virtual farm field trip. We are live today in two locations, one in Cheshire, Oregon, and Mesa, Arizona. My name is Bella, and I'm a college student studying agriculture at Oregon State University, and I'll be the moderator today. Before we start our tour today, if you're joining us on Zoom, please send your question through the Q&A feature. If you're watching on the Oregon Ag in the Classroom website, please submit the form beneath the video. Please only type questions into the form so others won't be able to see your questions until after they are answered. We hope to get to lots of questions today. However, we probably won't have the chance to get to all of them. We'll be sending out a document that answers the questions after the tours today. It is now time for us to travel to Mesa, Arizona, where we will learn about citrus trees from John Babiars at Greenfield Nursery. Take it away, John.
Good morning from Mesa, Arizona. A nice balmy 49-degree day and windy. And today we're going to be talking about citrus, how we start from seed, propagate the seed, and maybe if we have time, we'll show you how to do a little budding and how we from germination to budding, and eventually if we look across the way you'll see some 40-year-old navel orange trees, and that's ultimately what you want to end up with. And all this begins with this tree in front of me. Now this is called a Seville sour orange. This is what we use for our rootstock. All citrus are budded, just like roses are budded, whereas apple trees and other stone fruits are grafted. Citrus is different. Citrus are budded. And by the way, just so you know that citrus trees are not really trees, they're shrubs. And this is why we grow the branches down to the ground. Excuse me. Otherwise, they are subject to ultraviolet burn, sunlight. And we see that a lot where people trim up their trees so high to make them look like a tree instead of a shrub, and then they ultimately have to paint them white. If they don't, they sunburn. But really, the best fruit production on citrus is from your eyes down to your toes. The stuff above your head is usually sunburnt, and I call it the trash. But a lot of people are used to eating the trash because they've cut all the lower branches away, and their best production is on the ground. So we're going to walk over to our greenhouse in a second and take this sour orange. We'll cut it open and I'll show you the seeds inside it and how we develop the seed, how we germinate them. So right now while we're walking, if you have any questions, you can ask me now.
Perfect. Okay, so one question that we have is, how many pounds of citrus fruit do you harvest each year?
Well, this is a citrus nursery where the fruit is actually a byproduct. We really are not in the fruit business as much as we are in the tree business. In other words, we are one of the largest suppliers in Maricopa County for citrus trees for your yard. We grow approximately 67 different varieties of citrus. Most people just think of navels or lemons or grapefruit, but actually we grow a half dozen types of oranges, another half dozen types of lemons, and watch your step here. So we have multiple varieties. Some fruit actually you only use the leaves for cooking. So like kaffir limes, it's for Thai food. And so there are lots of different uses for citrus besides the fruit. So what we're walking through here now is one of our greenhouses, and we're going to show you how we germinate the seeds. So this is the sour that I picked off the tree where we were standing to. And if we open it up, you'll see these little sections just like your orange. But inside these sections are seeds. You can see one right there. Now what you do is when you open these up, and you could do it yourself, pull out the seeds, and you get the really plump ones. There's lots of seeds that are not so viable, but here you see there's 4 seeds that would work. So then what we're going to do next is figure out a way how we're going to germinate these. So these seeds from here, they go over, this is just one method, there's several methods, but they go into these little plastic boxes. So Next time you go to your restaurant and you get take home, save the box. And what we do is we'll take these seeds and we excuse me, we put them in one of these containers. We set the seeds in there and on a paper towel, a damp paper towel. And then you go ahead and cover the paper towel back up, cover it up, and let it stay warm. It has to stay warm. Like right now, you can see the sun's coming through here and starting to warm these up. But being that it's 49 degrees out, it'll take a while. But it takes a couple of weeks for them to germinate. And when they do, let's see if we can find one here and one of these others, you'll see there'll be a little stem, that starts to appear on the seed. I don't know if you can see it or not. That's the root, okay? And so once that starts, then we collect these individual seeds daily, and they go into, back here, they go into these little sleeves. These are an 8-inch sleeve with some potting soil and a special mix. And the seed will go in here and eventually it will start to grow. If we look over here on this side, and by the way, this plastic keeps them the humidity up a little bit and warmer. So right there, you can see some little seeds that are coming up from that same process. So this little guy right here will develop a root. So this tree is about 3 weeks old right now. They grow really slow, really slow. And unfortunately, anything can go wrong in the meantime. They could freeze, you could have bugs, you could have a rabbit get in here, and it could be a lot of issues. So that's how those are grown. So once they're in these sleeves and they get to be about 8 to 10 inches tall, 1 year old, then the sleeves are transplanted out into the field. So we're going to walk over here and I'll show you where they go.
All right, so while we're walking, I'll ask another question.
Sure.
How long does it take for an orange to ripen once it forms on the tree?
It generally takes 6 months. So they'll flower in March. Most citrus will all flower in March. Some varieties will flower twice a year, but not many. Like limes will flower twice a year. Some lemons will. Meyer lemons will flower. These are Meyer lemons, for instance, in front of us here. Meyer lemons will flower twice a year, but Elizabeth lemon, 1 crop a year. So most of them flower in March, and then you don't start harvesting the fruit until the fall. So for instance, a navel, I tell people, has a little belly button underneath it. So you can tell it's a navel, but also the N in navel stands for November. So that's easy to remember. That's when they start to harvest navels, is in November. And then they all periodically ripen in the next few months. And so if you decide you want to put some different types of trees in your yard, what you do is you put trees in that vary the harvest so they don't all ripen at once. Otherwise, you can have a plethora of fruit and not know what to do with it all or give it to your neighbors. But meanwhile, if you start with navels in November, then you can go with one of the 5 or 6 varieties of Arizona sweets, and you can use them for juicing or eating or a combination. And then you could go with your grapefruit and eventually Valencias. And if you can remember, Valencia starts with V and it's almost near the end of the alphabet, and that's the last one, okay, to ripen is a Valencia. Most of your orange juice is made from Valencias. All Florida orange juice, for instance, is made out of Valencias. Whereas, Orlando Tangelo is a good juicer, and actually, I think it's better than Valencia, but most people use Valencia oranges. So what we're going to do here now is look, this block right here, or each row, is a different type of a tangerine. So all these tangerines have been growing here for about 3 years, and they're ready to either be harvested directly out of here for sale, or they go out into the field and grow to be larger trees. Because obviously, a big mature tree takes a lot of space, and you can see these trees are rather close. When we start citrus, it's buzzing. When we start citrus, We usually start about 4,000 trees per acre, whereas a commercial grove will have 100 trees per acre. So what we'll do is take the from 4,000 trees when we go to harvest, we dig every other tree. And then what happens is when you dig one tree, you're actually cutting some roots from the two adjacent trees. And so that actually helps root prune the roots. In other words, you cut one root, you'll get two. You cut two roots, you get four. And so the following year, we'll go back to that row and again take every alternate tree, every other tree. And what we really have is a tree with extra roots that are not naturally because we root pruned them on one side and the other, and that way the trees are less chance to go into shock when we harvest them. So that's the reason for that. So right now these trees are approximately 12 inches apart. Eventually they'll be 8 feet apart when we put them out in the field. So that's how it's done. So if you have any questions, now we're going to go to another section where I will cut a bud and we can see how these trees actually start. Okay, let's walk this way.
Perfect. So while we're walking, a question is, how long can a citrus tree live?
Quite long, actually. If they're taken care of properly, they'll live about 150 years. And it's interesting that the Washington Navel, it's really called the Washington Navel because the first Washington Navel buds came from Brazil and they were planted back in the late 1800s in Washington, in the DC, the Washington Arboretum. And later, those trees were transferred to Riverside, California. And believe it or not, downtown Riverside, one of the original trees from the 1800s is still alive and in downtown Riverside with cars driving all around it. I'm just going to see if we can see. If you look at this too, this is the Naval Orange, and you can see the round little belly button underneath. That's why they call them navels. Okay. This is a navel tree, and these here are approximately 30 years old or so. So in other words, they've been doing this business for about 45 years already. So we're going to walk over here to a block of Arizona sweets. And you can see they're just starting to turn color now. They actually are green because of the chlorophyll in them. But once it cools down enough, the tree withdraws the chlorophyll from the fruit itself, and that's when they turn orange or yellow, and if it was a grapefruit. Now, if we walk over here, something I'll show you real quick. Some of these fruit on this east side here, you'll see that yellow and green on the other side. Green on one side and that's yellow. That's not because it's ripening. That there and that there is sunburn. So sometimes the fruit will actually crack like you see a tomato would crack if it gets too wet. These fruit, as they start to grow in size in the fall, will split along this area right here because this is scar tissue. It's a little bit thicker there and it doesn't want to, the elasticity is diminished when it's sunburned. Just like your skin gets really rough when it gets sunburned. And so these will crack sometimes. You see that a lot in tangerines where they split. So these trees here, we can see there's some void spots here where we've been harvesting these trees. This tree will come out in what we call a 30-inch diameter box. And just really from experience, you know how much roots you need to take to sustain the tree. We'll prune them back, harvest it in a box, or we have another process called ball and burlap, and we can go look at those sleeves if you want later to see how that's done. But these trees are extracted and they're available for sale to put in your yard. And if you look this way, you'll see that water coming in there. Well, I'm doing some irrigating right here. You can see it running right through there on this bay. So all of our areas here, we use a lot of water. This is all flood irrigation water. So all our systems here, each individual bay is flooded with about 4 or 5 inches of water and allowed to soak in. And about 2 weeks later, we'll repeat the process. In the winter, like now in the coolness, and there's not as much evaporation, we'll flood once a month. But in the summer, we do it every 13 days, 1 week to 13 days. And so if we take one of these orange trees here and I want to reproduce this tree, well, how am I going to do that? Well, first of all, I'll find some buds, what we call a bud stick. And this is last year's growth. So I'll go through this tree and I'll find one of these stems here, like this one is a good one, clip it. So this is now what we call our bud stick. So where every one of these leaves, the leaf terminates in a bud. Now every one of these little buds carries the complete genetic code of this tree. And so if I want to um, reproduce this tree, this is an Arizona sweet. This one's called a Macetera, this variety. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to take one of these buds and I'm going to put it, the bud itself, and I'll cut it here, show you in a second, into the cambium layer of one of those baby sour oranges when they're ready to go. They have to be 2 years old. The sours that we started over there in the greenhouse, once they're about 2 years old and about the size of a Sharpie, certainly at least a pencil, but a Sharpie would be better, then you can introduce these buds into the tree. Now, when it's cold, you can't do it because during the winter, like I said, the chlorophyll is disappearing because that's what's turning this fruit orange. Also, the sap is going down into the roots. The less moisture in the trees, the less apt they are to freeze. That's Mother Nature's way of protecting this tree. If it's flush and full of moisture in the spring, let's say, and you have a late freeze, then you can have some big frost problems. So hopefully you don't. Now, what we're going to do is there's certain knives. This is called a budding knife. They're knives that are made just for this process. So what we're going to do is take one of these buds off this bud stick and we'll pretend maybe I can find a branch over here that that's a sour orange and we could show you how it's done. It's done, usually the temperature has to be in 70, 72 degrees when there's sap in. Right now it's difficult to split the bark, but you'll get the idea. So what we want to do is extract one of these buds. So we're going to take a couple off here. I'll just take one off right here and show you. So this bud here, this little piece, you can see it's pretty small right there. That has a complete genetic code of this tree. So the object is to take this and turn it into that, a full grown tree. And the process is called budding. You do this with roses. Whereas if this was an apple tree, you're actually grafting, which is a whole different process. So what we do is, let's say we can find a branch here somewhere. We can prune one up a little. Let's see, we got some sun here. We can do this one. I'll show you. This, we'll cut some branches here and pretend that this branch right here is our rootstock. So make believe that this is the sour orange rootstock. So what we want to do is take this tree and turn it into an Arizona sweet. So what occurs is these bud nodes where I cut these branches off, we want to insert one of these little buds. So what we do is we take this knife and we draw what this is called T budding. So you form an upside down T. So what we'll do is we'll draw the knife down, straight down in the bark like that. And then we make the upside down T at the end of the cut, just like this. And then what you do is you open up the cambium layer of the tree, and you can use either side of this knife. We'll just use this side here. And I'll pry it open here. Like I said, it's going to be a little difficult because the bark is really taut because there's no moisture in it in wintertime. So if you can see that little opening occurring right there in the bark. And so right there, you loosen up the bark, and this bud is again cut off and inserted in. Now, when you cut it, you got to have a sharp knife. And matter of fact, you should always bleach your tools too. Remember that Clorox is a good sanitizer. So keep your tools sterile. You go ahead and cut the bud. Have a sharp knife. 1, 2, don't cut your thumb. And then this bud will go up into this tree. I'm going to show you how it's done. Generally, when we do it on a smaller tree, the bud stays on the knife because you really don't want to touch it because you have oil in your skin and you don't want oil on the bud. But this bud will be inserted right up under the bark like that, and we'll push it up later. If it was warmer, it would be allowed. But you push it up in here. So once the bud is here, we take some green tie tape, we wrap it around this right over the whole bud, and it sits there for 2 weeks. Okay, and then we open it up and we can go look at some trees that were budded here about a month ago or so. You open it up, and if the bud is still alive, you did your job. Then we could cut the tree above or snap it over, and then the sap will come up and allow this to start to grow. Once it starts to grow, then we follow it up with a wood stake so it stays straight. And then you'll see like these trees in here are budded already a couple of years ago, but there's the wood stake. The graft or the bud is right down on the bottom. You can see the little jog, maybe even on that one over there. That's where the bud was put in, 6 inches to 8 inches above the ground. That's one method. The other method is if you fail and the tree is already a little bit older or the bark is a little older on the bottom where you can't get the bud to insert, then you could also do what we call top work of the tree, which is rather than one bud, you'll put three buds at about 30 inches above the ground and one on each side. And when they start to come out, they form the crown. In this method here, we started at the bottom. You'll see where the jog is. We started at the bottom, followed the tree all the way up to 30 inches above the stake. When it gets about 4 or 5 inches above the stake, we cut the top off it and it forms the crown. Okay, because these are shrubs. So you can pom them, make them round. And actually, every time you cut a branch, like these have been cut several times, if we can find some areas here, like right here, I cut it and it formed two branches. Okay, if I cut it again, just nip the tip off, it'll form two more branches or three branches sometimes. So sometimes when we have failures, like this here is a failure. This is another sour orange where the bud didn't survive and consequently grew back to original parent tree, which is a sour. What do we do with that? Well, we could cut it all off and top work it, or we could sell them as they are because a lot of people use these Seville sours because they're frost hardy as privacy hedges these days. And we actually sell as many of these for privacy hedges as we do edibles. Okay. Okay. So right now we can walk over to, um, let me see, what do you want to see? Okay, let's go and we'll take a walk to look at some different varieties. While we're walking, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we sure do. So, some of the questions that we have now are about the history of your experience and the farm. So, the first question is, when did you begin your career in the citrus industry?
I began in 1972, and actually, I was, believe it or not, I had a parrot, and the parrot liked oranges, and I saw an ad in the paper. At that time, I was working at in the hotel business, really, after college. But I decided to dig up an orange tree at this development where they were destroying the trees for homes, and I went up, dug a tree, and planted it in my yard. After the second time we put the two or three trees in her yard, my neighbor came over and asked, "What would you charge to put one in my yard?" And I go, "What? You'd pay us to do this?" And that's how it started. Then on weekends after work, we were digging trees up and standing on a street corner selling orange trees. And from there, it started, typical of the American dream, I guess. And eventually now I own this business and gave up the hotel business, and which is probably good because of COVID. And I'm in the citrus business. And the byproduct is fruit. People have to eat, and if you can get into food business, you always got a market, and certainly you won't starve to death. At least you'll have plenty of vitamin C. So we'll go look at some other varieties. Now, again, I mentioned the Seville sours. You see here some right here. They're ready to go. The blue flags mean they're sold for privacy hedges. Okay, that's what those are, Seville sours. And then again, this method, these are different ages. These are what they call a 14-inch diameter ball. That's an 18-inch diameter ball. Sometimes we use the wood boxes. You can see here. And these are all different ages, but they are all the same Seville sours for hedges. Now we're walking. If there's any other further questions too, in a couple different bays. These here are different types of navels. Now I mentioned we have 5 different type of navels. You want to watch your step here. It's border. You don't want to slip in the mud. But these over here are called Caracara Navels. This is a different variety of navel, and I can see if I can find a fruit. There's one on the ground here. We did some trimming the other day, and it's still good. Let's just put that down. I'm going to cut this open. And here's how I usually peel them, by the way. I just notch the top off like this. I notch the bottom off like that. You can see the belly button here, which is the bottom of that navel on the bottom. There's the navel. There's a little extra, the belly button there, pops out like that. Then I just take my clippers and I'll notch it like this. The object again is not to cut your finger. And then you could peel these off. Now this here is called a Caracara Navel. And you'll see here in a second that these are pink inside. So this is what the fruit looks like. So we open it up and they're pink, almost like a pink grapefruit, but these are actually navels and they're really sweet and they're good for you too. These over here on this side are sanguinelli bloods. They're not ripe yet, but they also are red inside. And there's a lot of antioxidants in those that are good for you, healthy. Okay. So any other questions? And we could
Yeah, so we have time for only one more question, and that question is, how has your job changed due to COVID?
Well, actually, it's increased tenfold because now people aren't flying, they aren't going on vacation, they're staying home and they're looking at their backyard. They go, oh my God, what a mess. Let's do something. And so they're buying orange trees like crazy. So we've actually had a record year. You know, the old saying, one man's gain is another man's pain, or vice versa. And it actually helped us out quite a bit because people are now buying trees, staying home, taking care of their yard, and actually it's probably better planting orange trees for their health than flying to Mexico and sitting, you know, just drinking or sitting on the beach. Maybe relaxing is a good thing too. But you know, this is long hours. I mean, I cut my hours back to like 70 hours a week. I used to work 100 hours, 110 hours a week, live on 4 hours of sleep, 7 days a week. But you know, my age now, getting a little older, so I need a little more sleep. So I cut back my hours to about 70 hours a week and having fun.
All right. Well, thank you so much, John, for sharing your farm with us. We enjoyed all of the information that you shared with us. Now we'll head to a lot colder place where they are growing a holiday tradition. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Kirk Stroda of Stroda Bros Farms. Kirk, tell us about your farm.
Thank you for being here today. We're up here in Cheshire, Oregon, and one parts of our farm we grow Christmas trees. And we're standing in a field of Douglas fir right now. We harvest around 20,000 trees a year on this farm. Oregon produces we have 42,000 acres of Christmas trees in the state of Oregon. And Oregon itself produces 5.2 million trees a year we ship out to different states. We have several different varieties that we raise. This is the Douglas fir. We raise Nordman fir and Noble fir. We start them off as a seedling, as a 2-year-old tree, and then we plant them in the ground. And when we start taking care of them, and up to the 3rd year is when we start working on the trees. We start culturing this tree, which we'll show you here in a minute. We're going to show you a shearing demonstration, how we end up shearing the tree and making it into the shape that we want it. So that's what we do with Doug fir. As we kind of go, we'll walk over and start going to another spot. And while we're going by here, as we go out of a rotation, when we end up clear cutting a field, what we do, we take the stumps out of the field, we come back in, take soil samples and find out what our ground needs, and we'll put that on. And then what I do, I'll put a cover crop in. What we have here is just regular oats. We plant them, we'll run at least 1 crop of oats. We work it back into the ground, which puts humus back into the soil. And also, we're on hillsides here, so we have a lot of erosion. And when we put the oats out here, it stops the erosion so we don't get a bunch of mud and runoff down into the roads and in the creeks. So as you can kind of see over here, this is a field of 2-year-old Nordman fir. We plant everything in rows. We're planting 5.5 by 5.5 is what we're is what our spacings are. And you can see these yellow covers. What we have is we've got jackrabbits in our area, and they'll come out of the bigger tree fields and they'll come down and eat the tops out of our seedlings. We've only got them on the first little bit of rows. The rabbits, most of the time, they don't bother out into the field. I think they're worried about predators coming and getting them. So what they'll do, they'll eat the trees on the edge of the fields. So after one more year, we'll take these covers off the top of these trees, and the rabbits don't seem to bother them once they start getting to be a little bit taller. So all of our seedlings are virtually the same size when we plant them, and the Doug fir and noble fir would look just the same as what these smaller Nordman fir do now.
All right, while we're walking, if you wouldn't mind answering our first question.
Okay.
So the question is, when do you start growing the trees, and how long does it take until they are ready to be Christmas trees?
We start planting the trees anytime in the spring. Once we start drying up and be able to get out in the field, it won't be too wet. And the field of the Douglas fir, what I was standing beside back there, that was a 7-year-old tree. Douglas fir are 7 to 8 years old to be able to get them up into the 6 to 8 foot range, and that's our #1 seller. And then we go into a field of noble fir. You can see here, these trees here are 9 years old. They grow slower, and it takes longer to end up getting a tree to marketable size. On our noble fir, the tops don't grow straight. I can show you this tree up here. A lot of times if we cut the tops, that's how we start making a tree to be fuller. What we'll end up doing is cutting the top. We don't let it get big and long and tall. So what we do, we'll cut this off, and then what it does not want to grow up a straight top. So we come back in and we'll put a bamboo, we'll tie it down in here to the last year's main trunk that's straight up and down. And then we bend this over, so we end up having a straight top on it. And then what we have to do is bud these, because if we cut this and we don't cut these, Mother Nature is going to want to have these to grow up and want to be a top. So what we have to do then is nip these also, so it doesn't end up keep growing up into having extra tops on them. Like I said, these trees here, this is our U-cut field. So we've got all kinds of different sizes. So what we've got up to, there's some 9-foot trees out here. So when we do our U-cut, we have people come in on weekends and be able to come pick the tree that they want. We cut it for them, we shake it and bale it and put it in the back of their pickup. So another question?
Yeah. So one question is, when do you know it's time to harvest the Christmas trees?
When we get up into our #1 market is a 6 to 7 foot tree. So that's where we gauge it. And what we do when we're gonna be cutting a tree, we go up and down the row, and I don't have a tag with me, but we'll hang a bread clip tag on that tree. So say right here, you've got a row. I'll go up and I'll look at this tree. This is I consider a #1. I would put a cut tag on it. And then the tree up here would be the same thing. I'd put another cut tag on it. So then what we do, we have the cutter that comes through and he cuts the tree. And then we have our slinging crew come in. We have ropes. We throw the ropes on the ground and we make like a loaf of bread. We put the trees in the sling, put the rope over the top of them. And that's when we have our helicopter, which you'll see in a little bit how to do that. Okay, you want to roll it now? We'll be able to watch the helicopter now. Okay, what we're watching here is the helicopters coming in. We call him the hooker, and he's hooking up the pile of trees with a rope, and the helicopter will take that down to our main landing and drop that off, and then he comes back up for another bundle again. The reason we use a helicopter is it's fast. It's expensive to use a helicopter. They're about $900 an hour. And but we can move a lot of trees very quickly. And what you're seeing here is we have our rope pullers. They'll come in and they'll pull the ropes, unhook them from the bundle, and then we have a motorcycle that comes in, and he's got a hook on the back of it that we pull the ropes out. We put the ring on the back of the motorcycle, and he pulls the ropes out of the bundle. It's a whole lot easier to use the motorcycle than physically having to pull those out. Does that keep going? Okay. Got our head foreman, Jose, is going to come in, and we've got a field of Douglas fir here. And this is what those trees that we were just at before look like before we end up shearing them. And what we have, Jose, we've got it, he'll have a machete, and he comes in and he'll give this tree a haircut. It's like you when you get up in the morning and your hair's all looking ugly, and after you put some water on it and comb it, it makes it all better again. But you can see the growth. This is how much growth that we'll get every year on these trees. And if we never did give them a haircut or shear them, this tree would be, this tree here, if we never cut the top and never did anything to it, it would already be 15 feet tall. But where we come back and give this thing a haircut every year, that's how we can keep the top, the shape down, and be able to keep it and form it into what we want it to look like. Any other question?
Yeah, one question is, how long has this farm been growing Christmas trees?
We've been growing Christmas trees for 35 years. So we'll kind of stop right here. This is, I don't know if you can hear. You can hear the machete going through and cutting the branches. He's wearing leg guards, and the reason we have the leg guards is every now and then if you slip or your machete gets caught on another branch, you don't want that to go into your leg and take you to the hospital. And then we're going around the back of the tree again just to kind of dress everything up and make it perfect. And this is what during the summer, usually about the 4th of July is kind of the time frame when the trees start hardening off, so we can be able to come through and shear. So this is where we have a crew that comes through, and that's what they do. They do this for a half a day, and then they go over and work in the noble fir, because this is really hard on their arms. You don't want to get themselves so tired and sore arms. Any other question?
Yeah, so another question is, going back to the rabbits that you talked about earlier, are rabbits the only animals that eat the Christmas trees or bother the Christmas trees?
Say that again now, I was kind of broke up.
Are rabbits the only animals that eat the Christmas trees or bother?
No, we have deer and elk problems also. We don't have so many of the deer and elk here, but there's other places that have them close by, and that is a real problem. Especially on the Nordman fir, and I do not know why the Nordman fir, but the deer, the same thing with the rabbits and the deer, it must be like candy to them, because that's a variety that they eat more than what they do of the Doug fir or the noble fir. Another question?
Yes. What type of tree sells the best?
I think the #1 seller is still probably Doug fir, but noble fir is right there at it. It's just a hardier tree. It's kind of, we could consider it as the Cadillac of trees. It lasts longer, it doesn't dry out as quick, but the tree that's coming on, and I think it'll be one of our big #1 sellers, and that is the Nordman fir. It's the same thing. It's very hardy. And the best thing with the Nordman fir is you don't get pests. You don't have any disease problems. You don't have any bug problems with it. So it's a kind of the tree of the future. Another question?
Yes. How has COVID-19 affected your business?
Um, well, it was really, everybody was nervous going in before harvest because nobody was knowing if they were going to let the Christmas tree lots that we sell to in California and Texas and Arizona, if they were going to be able to sell trees on the lots. And but they were able to do that. So, but other than that, with workers, we're out here, as you can kind of pan around and see, we don't have a lot of anybody around us and close. So the workers are able to stay away from each other and work without a problem. What you can see here, this is our yard, our shipping yard. We've got the trees. We bring the trees in here with the helicopter and they fly, and you can see the different kind of the piles with the different colored tags. That is the sizes. The red tags here, that's a 5 to 6. 6, 7s are the yellow tags. And we got a pile of greens here, that's 7 to 8 tags. And we have those sizes. We have trees that go all the way up to 15 feet tall, and all of them have a different tag that we put on them. So what we're seeing here, we call it our baler. So when the trees come in, you can see the pile of trees behind him. Those trees were flown in by the helicopter yesterday morning. So what we do, they come in, and on the back of the baler, there's a shaker. We shake the tree. We try to get, we don't get all the needles out of it, but we probably get about 70, 80% of the needles out of that tree. And then they puts it in the jaw. And as they're pulling that out through, it's got twine on it that wraps the tree up. And they cut the string and then they slide it down to the end. We call it the headboard of the table. And on the other side of the baler, we've got color coordinations, like I was telling you, the tags. That's a 7 to 8. He'll put that into a 7 to 8 pile. Once again, you can see the shaking. It's something that we've started doing in the industry probably 7, 8 years ago. And your mom, I'm sure, is happy at home to have less needles in the house whenever she brings the tree in. There's still going to be some, but that's kind of nature. Another question?
Yeah, one question is, how does each variety of Christmas tree differ in characteristics or size?
Say that again. I was by the baler and I was hardly hearing.
No worries. How does each variety of Christmas tree differ?
It's mainly the shapes. It's just the shape of the tree. Like I said, the noble fir are kind of more of a layered tree. And it's just your personal type. Some people like the Doug fir with that big full tree, and other ones kind of like something that's a little more spacey. Another question?
Yeah. How many Christmas trees do you sell each year?
We sell around 20,000 trees a year off this farm.
All right,
Another
next
question?
Yep. There's a 3rd grade class wondering, how many hours a day do you work?
We start at 7:30 in the morning, and we'll work 8 hours a day, but if we get behind and we need to get some more trees out processed or something like that, we will work longer than 8 hours, but it's mainly about 8 hours. It's pretty of a physical job, and the weather today is cold. We're 33 degrees today, and so it's not that bad working, but when it's pouring down rain and you're in your rain gear all day long, it makes a long day, and you're wanting to hurry up and get home. Another question?
Yep. How many employees do you have on the farm?
I'm hard of hearing.
How many
employees?
Yeah.
We've got 18 employees that we were using this year.
Okay. And our last question is, what happens when a Christmas tree is too big?
There virtually is none that get too big. If we have sold some up to 20 feet, but the market gets really small on the big oversized trees like that. Our number one seller is that 7 to 8 foot mark. But if a tree does get too big, and we've done this before, if the tree gets too big and the bottom starts getting weak on it, especially on a noble fir, we can go in and cut that tree off at 10 feet, 8 feet, and make a number one tree out of it. So. Anything else?
I think that's all the questions we have on our end. Oh, one more question. Where can people find your trees and where are you located? One more time for our viewers.
We're located in Cheshire, Oregon. We do U-cuts on the weekend, like I said, from 9 to 4 o'clock. You come out and pick your tree and we'll make you happy. I want to thank you guys for coming or watching this today. It's an interesting crop. It's something different. Most people don't know how it's raised. They see what a Christmas tree is, but they don't know what it is. We do not cut these out of a forest. These trees are raised from seedlings and very sustainable, all natural. I thank you for stopping by and watching us today.
Thank you. I'd like to say a quick thank you to both John in Arizona and Kirk here in Oregon for taking time out of your schedules to provide students with the opportunity to learn about these industries. Thank you to all of our attendees in both states for joining us today, and we hope that you enjoyed the virtual field trip and learned as much as we did.